This is part 2 of the biological contaminants. We ended part 1 talking about salmonella. Shigella is also a bacteria, and this is also found in the feces of humans with the illness. Flies can actually land on feces out in nature and transfer it from their feet to the food. Eating only a tiny amount of this bacteria can make you very sick. This bacteria can actually stay in your body for several weeks after the symptoms have ended. So foods that are easily contaminated by hands are likely to become contaminated from Shigella. Food that has made contact with contaminated water, such as produce. So it's very important to make sure that you are always washing your fruits and vegetables before you eat them. Also, you don't know who touched them in the grocery store or in the processing. So making sure that if a food handler has the symptom of diarrhea, that they are not preparing food. Wash your hands very regularly and make sure to control flies and other pests and insects. E. coli is something that is talked about a lot, and this is a really common one. And this is generally found in the intestines of cattle. This can also be found in the intestines of people. And meat can become contaminated during slaughtering. So usually when we're talking about E. coli, we are kind of talking about the outside of the meat. And so for something like steak, E. coli is generally killed through cooking on the outside of the meat. But when you're handling raw meat, it's really important to make sure that you're keeping your hands and surfaces very clean and that you are cooking it very well. Ground beef and hamburger, every single bit of ground beef and hamburger has seen the air, unlike the inside of a steak. When you're talking about a steak, the outside of the steak is where you're mostly looking for that bacteria. But for hamburger, it could be all the way through. That is why you could eat a steak cooked less well done, but you don't want to eat hamburger that's not cooked at least to an internal temperature of at least 155. It only takes a little bit. Once you eat, it makes toxins in the intestines, and this can also be found for weeks after symptoms have ended. So you don't have to have symptoms to spread these bacteria. So E. coli is very commonly linked with the ground beef, hamburgers, and then produce. Although it lives in the intestines of cattle, the way that we factory farm cows and that they get fed corn and they don't really eat a lot of grass, that actually makes the E. coli worse in our food system. If we ate less cattle and we raised less cattle in the world, we wouldn't have as much of a problem because grass naturally kind of cleans E. coli out. And so farmers or people that are raising cattle out on pastures, like they walk around in a field and they eat grass a lot, they don't have that issue as much. Even grass-finished cattle has less of an issue. So when you go to the store and you see grass-fed beef, you can know that that is generally safer and it's also a healthier. So the main way to prevent this is to cook the food. Make sure that you are coming from reputable suppliers. Watch cross-contamination and keep those hands clean. A virus is a little different than bacteria. Bacteria has to live on food. Viruses can live on surfaces. So we carry viruses. Animals carry viruses. They have to have a host to grow. They don't grow in food. They can be transferred through food and remain in the food. So you can get a virus from food, water, or any contaminated surfaces. And just like bacteria, it typically comes from people not washing their hands after they handle things and use the bathroom. So viruses are not actually destroyed by the cooking temperatures, unlike bacteria. So it's really important to make sure you practice good personal hygiene, hand washing, and then if somebody has gotten sick in an area, you need to clean that up quickly. Hepatitis A is a really serious virus. It is really contagious, Cooking does not destroy it, and it is almost always transferred from food handlers because they haven't washed their hands well after they've used the bathroom. So, ready to eat foods that have been handled by hands, and also contaminated water. Making sure that if a staff member has been diagnosed, we've talked about jaundice, which is yellowing of that skin or eyes. You cannot prepare food, and wash your hands a lot. Make sure that you're wearing gloves and keeping that hand hygiene. Norovirus is very common, and this is also a virus that comes from hand feces contact. A little bit makes you sick. People generally become contagious just a few hours after they eat it, but you can actually keep this virus after your symptoms have ended. Just like the hepatitis A, just like the other viruses, ready to eat food, making sure if a staff member has diarrhea or vomiting that you're not preparing food. Keep that bare hand contact away from food. You can also get a biological contaminant called parasites, which are essentially like worms, like tapeworm. You have to have a host to live on that one. And typically, wild game, seafood, and food that's processed with contaminated water, like produce, is where you get parasites. Most best way to prevent foodborne illness is to make sure that you're getting food from a safe place. Cook the food will also kill those parasites. And if you are going to eat raw or undercooked food, make sure that it has been correctly handled. That's really important. So the final fourth type of biological contaminants is fungi. And fungi are yeast, molds, and mushrooms. Not all fungus, not all molds, not all yeast, not all mushrooms make you sick. And there's all kinds of good ones out there. Some of them produce toxins that cause foodborne illness. So it's really, don't eat the moldy food unless the mold is part of the natural part of the food, like in cheese. Because the mushrooms are difficult to recognize, make sure you buy them from the store and make sure you get them from good places. So if you get some biological toxins from fungus, you can also get some of those from fish, and they can become contaminated when they eat smaller fish. Shellfish can have these toxins. So, if you're going to eat the raw oysters, you are always taking a risk that you're going to get those biological toxins. So you could get all of those symptoms: diarrhea, vomiting, tingling, hot and cold sensations being messed up, flushing of the face, difficulty breathing, burning in the mouth, heart palpitation, and hives. So this is some biological toxin symptoms. These are also kind of symptoms associated with COVID too. So make sure if you get any of those that you go seek medical treatment. So cooking and freezing. Make sure you get all of your things from a good place and control that time and temperature.